Welcome to Monday, your DayWeather Podcast, brought to you by the Advocates Injury Attorneys. If you've been injured in an accident, don't face it alone. Get an experienced local Wyoming attorney on your side. Free consultations at wyomingadvocates.com or call 307-800-1952. You deserve an advocate. Well, we are going to see very strong winds aloft coming into the region here in the days ahead. This is going to make for a highly variable weather pattern in this region, and it really is going to be a lot different depending on where you are. Some locations you might say there's nothing going on. Some locations you might say, wow, there's a lot going on. And if you're in between those two areas, it's going to be a little bit of back and forth. First of all, the winds are just going to crank over a large geographic area. Very windy conditions, as you'll see here in a minute, as the Pacific jet stream wind is just going to be really cranking things up across the central and western United States. We're going to see significant snow in the northern Rockies over the course of the beginning of this week here. And then we're going to see snow spread out east of the divide, especially from Montana, the Dakotas, possibly the far northern and northeastern counties of Wyoming, and then into the upper Midwest. We're also going to see an Arctic push east of the divide. For the most part, the central Rockies will dodge this bullet, but we're going to see some far below zero temperatures just to the east of the Rockies later this week and this weekend. And that's going to mean when you have this big temperature gradient, you're just going to have a lot of wind. So the wind is going to be getting at it. I hate to say it. Some cool photos coming in from the weekend. Now, going back to last Friday, we got a little bit of color in the clouds here late last week and really quiet conditions ahead of the change in the weather this weekend. Beautiful sunset there in the Casper area. Then that northwest wind aloft with that moisture came in, bringing a big shot of snow. Snow totals, generally speaking, 1 to 3 feet over the northern and central Rockies. Some areas got more, some areas got less, but as you'll see in a moment, the snowpack conditions really got a huge boost. Yes, that is from this weekend. That looks like a thunderstorm, and you know what? Those snow squalls that we were concerned about formed, and some of them, yes, did produce a few lightning strikes and put on quite a show. Some of you driving through them saw your visibilities go down very, very low as they went through. Those dark, heavy clouds over the Sierra Madres in the mountains of south central Wyoming, depositing 2 to 3 feet of snow in the southern mountains of Wyoming this weekend. And all across the high plains, especially Saturday, it was kind of a rough and tumble day. There's the Rock River Ridge on the north end of the snowy range, shrouded in the snow. And then a good shot there, pretty shot, up the Ten Sleep Canyon. And then the Wind Rivers. Fresh snow and a lot of wind, and this is kind of a preview of what's coming. Here's a preview of what's coming if you're underneath the ridge along the west coast. A lot of nothing here for a little bit longer. The satellite photos show really the Pacific Northwest and the northern areas. This is going to be the story. The Pacific Northwest, the far northern plains and the northern Rockies into the Great Lakes. That's where winter for the next 7 days is really going to be the most rambunctious. South of the jet stream into the southwestern United States and over here, you're just not going to see much weather. We talked about the snowpack. So this was a snowpack late last week. You can see a lot of red. The red means you're less than 50% of average. But as of yesterday, we saw a lot of red go to orange. We saw a lot of orange go to yellow. We got a long way to go, but we saw in some locations here a 30 to 40% change in snowpack conditions from that pattern that developed late last week and over the weekend. So hopefully we can add to those totals, and I think we certainly will. This is going to be really true up here and even over into here as we go into the next 7 days. What we have is a little bit of a unique weather pattern. We have a very strong flow covering a long distance that comes from the west-northwest across North America, across the Pacific, and across the United States. As we showed you last week, the polar vortex was going to go east-west instead of north-south. And so the big difference in temperature from it being very cold up here and warmer here is causing extremely strong jet stream winds. And when they get strong like this, it's hard to have them bend make loops, make those troughs and make those ridges. So you get this straight line flow that's going to come on in. If you look at this from a hemispheric pattern, looking from space down on the North Pole right here, you can see how long this fetch of westerlies is across half the globe. So just really strong jet stream winds coming across the northern hemisphere. And this pattern right here is going to make my life very difficult in terms of what's going to happen in the long term, as I'll show you here in a little bit. So when we have this strong west to east flow like this, you're going to drive the moisture from the Pacific and the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada. But this dip here is going to allow Arctic air to spill out of Canada and into areas east of the divide, into the northern plains and the Great Lakes. And then you set up the battleground right here between air masses. So you get a ton of wind and you get little ripples that come on through that can produce some unsettled weather. We talked about wind. This is just through Wednesday. I'm not even going past Wednesday, but between now and Wednesday, look at the winds from the Dakotas to the Rockies to the Pacific Northwest, the wind-prone areas of I-25, I-80, even into I-70 here. Ugh, yuck. It's just going to blow, and it's going to blow very strong. And up here, where it's colder, the wind is going to combine with Arctic temperatures and snow. So this is through Wednesday. The northwest flow will bring more snow and heavy rain to the Pacific Northwest here. The mountains of Idaho and Montana are going to do very well, up into Canada as well. Wyoming's northwest mountains, the Bighorns, southern mountains get a little more snow. And then up here, this is where it's going to be kind of ugly because you're going to get the wind with the snow and you're going to get the Arctic cold. And we're going to be looking at the boundary of the Arctic air kind of wiggling north and south. And this is going to be especially true in this area I'm going to highlight right here. You're in the most variable, changeable areas, especially right on the boundary here, where things could really fluctuate, and that's where the wind could really get going. Snowfall through Wednesday looks like this. So you can see the mountains doing well, then you can see the snow coming out onto the plains. We have a lot of high wind advisories. All this brown here is for wind. Then we've got winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories for Wyoming's northwest mountains and valleys. Heavy rain in these areas here for flooding concerns. Then you've got winter weather advisories for more winter weather up there and even across the mid-Atlantic. So there's a lot going on, but you can see it's the northern tier of the U.S. where the action is. Now by Friday, it's kind of a similar setup. We have these strong northwest winds aloft coming into the north central plains, into the Great Lakes, and then we have this complex area of high pressure wanting to build in the Gulf of Alaska and the Aleutians, but a low forming underneath the high. So with this low forming underneath the high, that makes it hard for the jet stream to make the dip in the west. And so it gets more deflected to the east. That's where the cold air is going. Notice the polar vortex is sort of reorganizing itself. Look at these temperature anomalies by Friday morning. This is the tail of the continental divide and how the divide stops Arctic air a lot of times from getting west of the divide. So by Friday morning, basically the Arctic air boundary is just like this, right here. So the funneling of that purple, the really cold air, is going to be directed here. But along the west coast and the Pacific Northwest and the central and southern Rockies, that warm Pacific air is getting driven in. So the warm Pacific air gets driven in, the continental divide holds up the Arctic air, and this nose of the Arctic air is going to go right towards eastern Montana, far northeastern Wyoming and the Dakotas, then into the Corn Belt and Great Lakes again. And that's going to lead to late this week and this weekend really cold air. So this is Friday morning, this is Saturday. You can see that the Arctic air advances, but the Pacific is pushing hard against it. And the continental divide is just basically the battleground. So you just get a lot of weather when you get these Arctic air masses and these Pacific air masses wanting to come together. Along and west of the divide, you're going to be mild. East of the divide, your temperatures can bounce around because one moment you're Arctic, the next moment you're Pacific. And temperatures are going to be really cold. Look at these anomalies by Saturday afternoon. You can see the big difference, especially, look at this in Montana and parts of northeastern Wyoming. So you could be very cold here and a lot warmer here. Then, of course, if you're in the Dakotas, eastern Montana, you're in the freezer. Look at these sub-zero temperatures by Sunday morning into the upper plains, and look at the cold in Canada. I mean, it is really cold. These are the temperatures in Fahrenheit, possibly by Sunday morning into the northern plains. But you can see the Pacific air is in the Rockies, keeping temperatures warmer and keeping a little bit of Chinook going. So through Sunday, snowfall looks like this. Montana, the Dakotas into the upper Midwest. One area we need to watch is right here, because if there's any southwestward shift of the Arctic air, if it wiggles more southwest, there could be a lot more winter weather here than the model is showing at the moment. But if you look down into Colorado, Kansas, along and south of I-70, you're just not going to get any weather other than wind. It's going to be biased towards the northern areas. But you have to watch where you're in between the air masses, as the wiggle could cause things to fluctuate. And that's something we just have to watch for late this week and the upcoming weekend. So by Friday, we're looking like this. By the time we get into next week, we see that the hemispheric pattern changes. And I wanted to spend a quick, brief moment here showing you this. This is where we are this morning with the hemispheric pattern. This is the same map I showed you earlier with the large fetch of westerlies across North America. And the polar vortex kind of in two lobes right now. This east-west lobe here, just kind of a bigger lobe over on the other side of the globe. When we go through the week and by the time we get to the weekend, by Sunday, I want you to notice something. See this big high pressure ridge right here wanting to form, basically north of the Aleutians there? What you're getting here is a high wanting to form, which usually would cause the Arctic air to spill into the western United States. But right here and right here, we have these two upper level lows that make the flow more westerly instead of making a dip. What we're not sure of is if this is actually going to happen or not. But if these two lows right here sort of merge into one, that keeps the westerlies going well into early next week. And what that does is that directs all the Arctic air into here, and it keeps the western United States in a mild flow. Even though you've got the ridge building up here, this undercutting of the lows right here could keep the westerlies going. So that's something that if it does develop, the westerlies dominate. But we're not sure if the models are handling this correctly. So that gives us extremely low confidence once we look at the weather past this upcoming weekend. Don't forget our regional travel forecast. You're going to want to stay tuned because the wind is going to wreak havoc on roads and highways and secondary roads over the course of the days ahead. We'll see you tomorrow.